Soren always felt that this demon subduing blade technique was far from ordinary. His predecessor had spent only 3 to 5 years to train the bone-shattering grappling hand to great accomplishment. Yet when practicing this blade technique, even with undivided attention, it took a whole 8 years just to reach minor mastery. It took a full 33 years to finally reach perfection and grasp a faint spark of insight. If he could fully capture this spark, its effects would undoubtedly be beyond anything ordinary martial arts could match. With a slight nudge of his thoughts, he poured 10 years of his fiend's lifespan entirely into the demon, subduing blade technique.
You continue to temper your already perfected demon subduing blade technique. 10 years pass in the blink of an eye. That spark of insight becomes increasingly clear. But unfortunately, your talent is mediocre, and you simply cannot fathom it.
That is it. Soren felt a tightness in his chest. This was a full 10 years, and it was 10 years of abandoning all distractions to focus solely on this single goal, even if he had spent 10 years working a factory assembly line without any entertainment. He could have earned enough to buy a house in a small town. Yet, sinking it into this martial technique hadn't even caused a splash, having already invested so much. Giving up was out of the question. Soren decisively continued to pour his lifespan into it.
In the 17th year, you finally grasp that faint spark of insight and begin attempting to record it into a manual. In the 27th year, exhausting all your energy, you finally perfect it and name it the Demon, subduing true young blade. Remaining fiend's lifespan, 36 years.
A self-created martial art? A sudden flood of insights regarding the blade technique appeared in Soren's mind. Once he finished absorbing them, he realized it wasn't quite what he had imagined. On the status panel, a new line of text had appeared beneath the demon subduing blade technique.
Initial realm, demon subduing true young blades.
This was not an entirely new martial art, but rather something akin to a derived ultimate technique, meaning it had no proficiency level. After a total of 60 years of refining, he had despairingly realized that mortal limitations were absolute. With a mortal body, no matter how skilled his blade work, or how tirelessly he tempered his physique day and night, he could never hope to clash with true grand demons. Thus, he had conceived the idea of mobilizing the essence blood within his body, refining essence into qi, and then channeling that qi through the long blade in his hand. Initial realm? Soren looked at the prefix. The last time he had seen this term was in the system notification after slaying the dog demon. Awakened dog, demon, had not entered the initial realm. In other words, this true young blade stance already touched upon a certain boundary of cultivation. If I continue to deduce the demon subduing blade technique, is it possible to directly create an entire initial realm martial art rather than just a single blade stance? Soren closed the panel, excitement surging in his eyes. But soon, he rationally suppressed the urge to pour all of his remaining lifespan into it. Creating a martial art from scratch was clearly highly inefficient. Investing the same amount of fiend's lifespan into an existing technique would surely yield better results. He remembered that the lieutenant from the Demon Suppression Division had passed down more than just one technique. Since he now held a modest position in the magistrate's office, acquiring them wouldn't be difficult. Time to rest first. Having suddenly experienced so many changes, the moment Soren let his mind relax, a heavy wave of exhaustion washed over him. Just as he was about to lie down, the father and daughter of the Vance family brought in the hot water they had prepared beforehand. The young girl gently soaked Soren's feet in the hot water and began massaging them in earnest with her rough, small hands. Soren closed his eyes, letting out a long breath. This was his very first time experiencing the feeling of being served by others, judging by how terrified the two of them looked. Even if he were to act like a wicked, tyrannical landlord in this household from this day forward, they certainly wouldn't dare object. Yet, Soren opened his eyes and merely offered a soft word of thanks. All right, that is enough. You may leave. I will rest for the night and depart tomorrow. He did not show any other unnecessary emotions. After all, given his predecessor's long list of misdeeds, no matter how gentle he acted, It would only cause the father and daughter needless anxiety and fear. Hearing this, old man Liu went stiff as expected, a mixture of doubt and belief filling his cloudy eyes. But he quickly recovered, pulling his daughter close as he nodded repeatedly.
Master Soren, you are too polite. You may stay as long as you like. If you need anything, just let me know.
Stumbling as they carried the wash basin, the two of them left and slipped into another room. The Liu girl clung to the window, unable to sleep all night. Whenever she closed her eyes, she saw Master Shen's sneering face, and whenever she opened them, she saw the corpse of the dog demon in the yard, its eyes wide in death. She endured until the first cockcrow of dawn. Through bleary eyes, she suddenly glimpsed a figure outside. The youth was clad in a black constable's uniform, his tall silhouette straight, with a saber hanging at his waist, cutting a remarkably dashing figure. He quietly left the courtyard, taking a moment to prop up the broken door torn down by the dog, demon to offer some meager protection against the biting wind.
Father, Master Shen has left.
Gone. Good riddance.
The morning dew was damp, and a thin mist clung to the streets. Soren emerged from the mist and stood before two stone lions. The Boying County Yamen, familiar with the way. He entered through the side door and walked into the duty room. The Boring County Penal Department was divided into 7 or 8 squads, and Soren was merely one of the minor leaders, commanding 8 runners beneath him, while his direct superior was Song Changfeng, the head of the penal department. He took a seat in his designated spot. Soren casually flipped through the ledger on his desk, only to find he could not make heads or tails of it. Aside from showing his own lack of education, it also proved that his predecessor had cared nothing for official business. The Dagon dynasty had been plagued by fiends for years, although the demon suppressing division had been established. They had always been severely understaffed. Dealing with these fiendish threats usually fell upon the local yamens as the primary force, and the demon suppressing division would only step in to fully take over the local area and conduct a sweep of the fiends once things had spun completely out of control. The aftermath of such an intervention always meant that the entire yamen would lose their posts, completely stripped of their local authority. It was under this very premise that his clever predecessor had found an opportunity to exploit. Through his knack for negotiating with the fiends, he not only kept Boyang County seemingly peaceful on the surface, earning him the trust of his superiors, but also spared his subordinates from having to risk their lives fighting the fiends, significantly reducing casualties and earning him immense prestige. He handled his duties so adeptly that over the span of a few years, he had gradually become poised to succeed Song Changfeng. Of course, not everyone was willing to fall in line. Soren's gaze swept across the empty duty room and the wine jars scattered around the table legs. He picked one up absent-mindedly and fell into silence. Just then, a lean young man rushed in a hurry. When he saw Soren sitting in the chair, a flash of disdain crossed his eyes before he quickly composed himself, taking off his bamboo hat to reveal a handsome face.
This subordinate pays respects to Lord Shen.
The newcomer was named Jace, though he had the least seniority in the duty room. His reputation was far from small. The reason for this was his extraordinary talent in martial arts, which had once even earned the praise of a lieutenant from the demon suppressing division. Unfortunately, he was young and impetuous. After suffering several setbacks at the hands of the fiends, he was harshly reprimanded by his superiors and dumped on Soren to be disciplined. Having lost his parents at a young age, he made a living in Boyang County alongside his younger sister. It just so happened that Soren's predecessor had been a ravenous lecher. After various clashes, both open and covert, they finally reached a fragile truce. Jace would obediently follow orders, and Soren promised to leave his sister alone. Hiss, why does it feel like I've already dug my own grave? Soren rested his chin on his hand, his mind drifting, until Jace finally broke the silence.
Lord Shen, this subordinate has just returned from the 6 League Shrine. Something has happened in the village.
Recalling his superior's previous orders, Jace showed a flicker of hesitation in his eyes, but quickly explained anyway.
Although you instructed us to ignore matters outside the city for now, this particular fiend refuses to play by the rules. It has actually taken up residence in the village.
He spoke faster and faster, seemingly terrified that Soren would interrupt him. a clear indication that he had been through this exact scenario many times before.
I hope Lord Shen can go and negotiate.
As he uttered the word negotiate, a flash of humiliation crossed Jace's face. Even so, he did his utmost to maintain a respectful tone, unwilling to anger his superior. After all, given Soren's personality, he would usually brush off such matters with half-hearted excuses, never actually caring. If he wanted him to intervene, he had to butter him up and keep him pleased. I recall that last time the lieutenant of the Demon Suppressing Division brought over 3 copies of martial arts manuals. Soren rose, walked to the doorway of the duty room, and stretched lazily. And if I remember correctly, you borrowed them? Jace stood frozen in place. Had Lord Shen completely ignored everything he had just said? Bring them here and let me have a look. Soren extended his hand. Taking a deep breath, Jace walked over to his desk and pulled out 3 meticulously preserved transcripts. The veins on the back of his hands bulging. He stood there for a long moment before finally handing them over, his heart aching at the gesture. Knowing his superior's habits, these precious fiend-quelling martial arts manuals would either be used to prop up a table leg or gifted as a novelty to amuse one of his mistresses. Soren would certainly never deign to cast a single glance at them. Soren took the transcripts and slowly strolled out the door. He left only Jace, who stood there dazed, his grip on his saber tightening by the second. That man, Shen, didn't even ask a single question. Did the lives of the commoners outside the city mean absolutely nothing to him? Just then, a figure poked halfway back through the doorway. It was Soren, who had doubled back, looking entirely perplexed. What are you standing there daydreaming for? Lead the way?